Hey everyone, this is Jonathan with the Covenant and Life podcast. I'm so excited to be with you here today and talk about this very important topic, sensitive topic, one that has affected me personally and has been a major part of my walk with God. And maybe it has been for you. And maybe if you're watching this and you used to be a Christian and you're not anymore, maybe it's because you walked through something like I did. And that is, how do we handle uh, spiritual abuse? How do we deal with corruption in the top leadership of the church? Whether that could be through uh, physical abuse, through clergy SA. You know, we're in a day and age right now where there is much being exposed across the church, and not just in the Protestant and evangelical tradition, but in the last 20 years, there has been much exposed across the board, even in the Catholic tradition. But that's not my tradition. I'm not here to talk about that today. There are others who can attest to that. But for me, in the Protestant tradition, that has been, you know, a pretty common thing. I feel like every day I open the internet and I see a new leader has fallen, and it is disheartening, and it is very uh, painful for the people who are affected. And you think of the work of Mike Winger right now, who has taken time off of his normal YouTube uh, content creation to focus on addressing a corruption in the charismatic church. And some of these leaders that he's exposed have connections or friends with some of the leaders that I was connected with that were of that same vein. And I'm going to talk about that today. You have Julie Roys, who, I have mixed feelings on. Um, I don't think that anybody should be making a living off of, reporting the dirt of the church. I do see that she says she's restoring the church, and I don't see how she is restoring the church. I just see her exposing, which, don't get me wrong, there's stuff that needs to get exposed. I pray one day that um, that there is justice for me and for the other my friends, people that my brothers and sisters who have also been hurt by very abusive leaders. But I also don't wish for that kind of ministry. I have very conflicted feelings about exposure ministry, because on one hand, in Timothy it says that elders should be exposed publicly, and some of these leaders deserve to be. They have a very big platforms, and they should be exposed publicly. But I do have a problem when it turned into a gossip kind of magazine, um, kind of like a. I don't want to use this word because there was a guy who is clashing with Mike Winger right now. Not the biggest fan of him myself, and I know people who are connected to him, but he calls them the TMZ crowd, the Christian TMZ crowd. Um, and I don't want to use that term because I don't agree with his use of it. But in a more pure sense of the word, like I don't like the idea of like a Christian TMZ, um, of unsubstantiated claims of just hearing something and just reporting on it. Um, you know, I found something really distasteful. Greg Locke, he's a very controversial charismatic pastor, and Mike Winger clashed with him for a little bit. And I think that Greg Locke's theology should 100% be challenged. And some of his claims that he made should be challenged. However, he lost his son to to an overdose, and Julie Royce put out a really distasteful article on him. That, even though I agree that Greg Locke is a problematic person, I found that to be a lowball attack on him, to call him a controversial leader. And he is, don't get me wrong, but there's a time and a place for that. When someone is knocked down, you don't, especially losing your son, man, like moving along, like even if you're dealing with like the most false of false teachers, they're still human and they're still made in the image of God. And we should show people mercy and compassion and dignity when they are fallen. And I think Mike Winger did a really, really, really good job at that. He was clashing with him, and then like the next day this happened. And Mike Winger was like, "Oh my gosh, man, like I'm so sorry." And unfortunately, it's kind of getting lost, and people are slandering Mike Winger. But before I'm not here to talk about all that. I'm here to talk about my story. And with all of that, I'm not here to go in details, because um my intention is to not blast anybody. If you know me and you're watching this, you will know who I'm talking about. I ask that you refrain from blasting anybody on my channel, because my point of this is not to blast anyone. My point of this is there is a lot of exposure ministry going on right now, and I don't want to call it exposure ministry because it's not a ministry of it itself, but it is part of ministry. I'm a church planter. I'm getting ready to plant a church and pastor it, and church discipline is going to be something that I'm going to have to do. And that includes elders, and there's different processes for elders. A lot of people who are against this crowd quote Matthew 18. Matthew 18 is not for elders. There's a different set. There's a different process for elders. A regular church member gets a lot more compassion and grace. Elders are held to a much, much higher standard. And my point is, I want to talk about pastorally, I want to talk about, as a Christian, how do we walk through these kind of difficult things? Nobody's really talking about that right now. I want to talk about, how do you process this? How do you keep a heart free from bitterness? How do you love Jesus in the process of it? Because this is something that is, this is something I walk through, and I know that there are many others. I talk to so many people who have dealt with what I have dealt with, whether in the same circles or in different circles. So let's talk about that today. Um, Let me give you a little bit of my background, and then let's set some context for this, and then um, let's talk about how to deal with this. So when I got saved into the charismatic church, into a sect of the charismatic church that would be called the New Apostolic Reformation, or the NAR. And a lot of the people in this movement wouldn't like to be called this. They said, we're not this, but they are. They are. I remember the talking points of, they're like, oh, why we're not this, but they are. And they believe in the foundation of, they believe in the role and the office of capital A, capital P apostles and prophets in the modern day. I'm not talking about being apostolic in the sense of being sent as a church planter or as a missionary. I'm not talking about being prophetic in proclaiming God's word in the scriptures, or even the gift of prophecy, which I believe in. I'll talk about that another day, my experience with that. But these offices in governing the church, they believe in that. And a lot of them have this idea of the Lord's anointed, honor culture. You don't speak against the Lord's anointed. And it's really just a lot of false thinking. Elders run the church, not apostles. The apostle and the prophet office were closed, um, you know, 2,000 years ago. And we can go bar for bar on this. If you want to debate me in the comments, I will tell you that virtually no, if you agree with this theology, you're alone. 2,000 years of church history disagrees with you. So good luck. But that's also not this. So I was in that movie, so I was part of I did an internship. I'm not gonna say where because it will make it clear. And after that, I went to a mission school. I was affiliated with this ministry, and I got to rub arms with some very, very famous charismatic leaders. If I said their names, you would know them. You know, had a dinner in their living room. I helped them move. I helped their children move. Um, you know, what's sad is that that culture that exists in that they probably don't even remember me, or they would remember me if they saw my face. Maybe I wasn't bald back then, um, but I remember them very clearly. And there's just been a lot of stuff that have come out about some of those leaders that I was connected with. Um, spiritual abuse, clergy, real things that are disqualifying things that some of them should be sitting in prison. And a majority of them should be disqualified. They should not be leading ministry. And then when I moved overseas, I just I just kept dealing with it. And so uh I, I'm trying to figure out how much in detail to go without like blasting anybody, just because there are already people who are doing that and I don't really wish to get involved in that. And what I want to get involved with is dealing with you, the average everyday believer, who's like, okay, what then should we do in this? And so let me talk about like the main things that I faced were being excluded, being gaslit, being lied to, being verbally abused. That was a little bit more recent. Getting my sins used against me, my weaknesses used against me. Some of that which led to like angry meetings full of tears. There's people who walked with me in that process. It was very painful. And it kind of creates a sense of rejection in you, in this sense of needing to prove yourself and feeling less than or feeling crazy. And do you relate to that? Have you felt that before? It's really hard to detangle those lies from your mind. And it's taken me a long time. And the number one thing that has helped me detangle that, because that's the biggest damage, right? Like, you know, let's say that like that leader is brought to justice that spiritually abused you or whatever, and they're disbarred from ministry. They're say disbarred like they're lawyers, but they're disqualified. They're removed from pastoral office or any other kind of leadership, and you're still left with pain. Their discipline, their punishment doesn't erase your pain. And for many people, this leads to a shipwrecking of their faith. And it's really hard. I've seen people lose their faith over this. I've seen some people who were dealing with very delicate things, same-sex attraction, that went through abusive spiritual environments, and now they're openly homosexual because they weren't cared for. And even the way that their attraction was talked about was just wrong, and they weren't cared for in the process. And you know, so let's talk about the number one thing I think that can help us in this process, if you're going through this, is identity. Because in this process, your identity is what gets trashed. Your sense of who you are, what you're made to do, who God has uniquely gifted you to be. That is what comes under attack in spiritually abusive environments. So the first thing that you need to do is ground yourself in who you are scripturally, because anybody could say anything. But what the scripture says, that's true. So when I was a teenager, my mom got saved, and we were going to this church, this Pentecostal church, and she married the youth pastor of that church. And he was very abusive, very, very abusive. And he was a youth pastor, like I said, and he would twist the scriptures in a way that would just really get in my head. So I remember the weekend that my mom kicked him out of the house finally. That morning, it was a Sunday morning. I'll never forget, because I rode my bike, because we were going to a Baptist church at the time. The Lord was trying to save us. No, I'm just kidding. No shade to my charismatic friends. Um, and I remember he had called me a son of Satan. Now, as a 12-year-old, that stuck with me. That like got super ingrained, because here's an adult who was a pastor, who knew better than me, who gave this identity to me. And it was really hard to detangle from. And from the moment I got saved, the Lord just emphasized, "You are my son," you know? And so I think detangling those lies about yourself that were told to you is the most important thing. You need to ground yourself in scripture. Ephesians 1, you are chosen, you were predestined, you were adopted, you are loved, you are redeemed. He foreknew you, he chose you. Romans 8, there's no condemnation. You are an heir, you are a son, you are a daughter. You need to ground yourself in that. That is the most important thing, because everything then else flows out of that. Because once you know who you are, once you ground who God says you are, then you can, when someone says, "Hey, you're this," like you are, let's say like someone calls you problematic because you're, I don't know, too zealous or whatever. Like, you can know, like, you don't have to prove yourself to that person. You're so anchored in who you are that it doesn't matter what they say. Um, it when you have that that deep root, like say you're a tree, you got those deep roots in your identity. The wind can blow, and sure, it'll bend some branches and whatever, but it can't knock down the tree. And the branches that were broken off can regrow again. The tree can heal. That's the first thing. Get grounded in your identity. Number two, once you realize who you are, number two, get some help. Like, like, like I would encourage you. So I went to counseling, and then I like a licensed counselor. And then I had various Christian leaders who walked with me, and then my current pastor, who I've talked through with a lot of stuff. You need to talk to someone about this, because there are lies. And even I talk to my wife about it all the time. There's lies that you are so deeply rooted that you believe about yourself, that you inherited in these circles. That so like one of the things that kept being brought against me was um that I was too zealous, too gung ho, and too like like insecure or like scatterbrained. And what I came to find out was I have ADHD. I got diagnosed with that. And and they but when that was used against me, it wasn't like hey, like you should really like, evaluate this. But it was like you are this, and you're broken. Like, we don't want you. And it wasn't like this, like there was no discipleship. There was just rejection. And in a safe environment, I was able to realize, like, I have ADHD, and that affects so much of my personality. And I've been getting treated for that. And, it's been different since then. Um, and also, like, you just realize that your personality just doesn't gel well with other people. You don't have to, like, I remember like always trying to prove myself to, I'm thinking about in that missions work, like this one guy that, he, and when I say it now, it's like, this is stupid. It's like high school, but he was like the cool guy, always organizing pickup games for the guys' basketball games, and just all these hangouts, camp. And I was never invited to any of it. And I remember being like, and I would be like the only guy, like there was three guys that were in the long-term training, and I'd be the only guy. It was just me, and I was never invited. And that hurt at the time. I cried a lot during that season. And I'm not a huge crier. I am now. I don't know what happened to me, but I wasn't always a big crier. And it was just hard. And I felt excluded. And I realized I just don't gel with that kind of people. I have a very unique and strong personality, and I'm socially awkward in some situations. I have a abrasive sense of humor, and there are people that love that about me. And that's the thing that I learned about talking with people is that, like, when I learned to love who God made me to be, I don't need to prove myself, and I can untangle those lies so that I can then, which leads me to the third thing, and find the right people, find the right community so that you can heal. And I would argue that this would probably be what you should do first. And they kind of, fall into each other. And that was my pastor right there, just texting me. That's funny. Um, and you know, you got to find the right people that celebrate you. I came into my church and I was just really disillusioned, just had a lot of ministry setback, went through some intense spiritual abuse and betrayal. And I came into this church and I was just like, I'm tired. But I don't know where I'm supposed to go or what I'm supposed to do. And I feel all these things. And my pastor, man, he just celebrated me, loved me, and supported me. And now here I am getting ready to plant this church in Southern California. And that came from community. And we talked, there were a couple times where some things came out against this particular community that I think did the most harm to me spiritually. And I talked with him. I'm like, what should I do? Should I? And he honestly helped disciple me through this process that I think was really healthy. And I'm very grateful for that. And that only came through good community. So that's what you need to do. Like, you need to realize that God loved you and made you a certain way. You need to talk to people about it. And then you need to get in good community. You need to get in good community so that people can talk to you, so they could speak life into you in identity. That's what you need. You can't heal in isolation. You heal by being plugged in with people. You don't just heal by, you break a leg, it's got to heal. Yeah, you have a splint on it, but you got to use the leg again. Otherwise, if you break your leg and you're like, I'm never gonna walk again. Well, that would be ridiculous, right? And so now, I should have prefaced this at the beginning. I'm going to just say it now. Spiritual abuse does not mean that your elders told you to stop living in sin, to stop sleeping with your girlfriend. Spiritual abuse is not, you are dealing with same-sex attraction and you're deciding to openly be a practicing, member of the LGBT community. That's not spiritual abuse. Or you're in a complementarian church, like in my movement, and you're a woman, and you know, I should say, and you're told that only elders can preach and teach on Sunday morning, and only qualified men can be elders. I say that with a distinction. That's not spiritual abuse. Now, if you're being told that you can't serve anywhere and you're no good and you're only good for being a stay-at-home mom and having babies, that's a different story. Okay, but spiritual abuse is is an intentional. It's a gaslighting. It is attacking you as a person. It's not calling you to higher. It's breaking you down. It's hiding things from you. It's lying to you. It's belittling you. It's excluding you. In some cases, it could be physical or clergy essay. This is spiritual abuse. When people weaponize your weaknesses against you, that is spiritual abuse. And so, to deal with these things, like I said, you need to know who you are. You need to uh, you need to talk to someone, and you need a good community. And then the last thing, and I'll wrap this up, is that you need to forgive. I don't mean to excuse, but I mean to forgive. There's a difference between forgiveness and excusing. Forgiveness means, in the Christian sense, it doesn't mean an escape from justice. Forgiveness is justice, because what you do when you forgive someone that maybe isn't even repentant is you say, vengeance belongs to the Lord, not to me. And so you forgive that person and you release them from offense. Now you don't need to hang out with them. You don't even have to talk to them anymore. But you need to not be in prison, and you need to entrust that person to say, Lord, either let them repent and find mercy in you, so that what they did to me would come upon Jesus Christ, that would be atoned for, or judge them in their sins. And we got to be comfortable with saying that. I have been committing several people that have hurt me seriously to judgment, who are unrepentant. That's okay. The Bible is full of that. If you want to fact check me, go read the book of Psalms. Okay. Read where Paul talks about being persecuted by the Jewish leaders. And he says, but wrath has come upon them at last from God. The thing is, it just doesn't come from us, because human anger does not produce the righteousness of God. And God's wrath produces righteousness. And so you need to forgive, release, commit to salvation or judgment. And that's really what it is. And I found a lot of healing. I've had certain leaders who were much lower in some of those organizations who have apologized to me, and that's been really healing. And their majority of them haven't repented to me, and some of them don't think that they did anything wrong. Actually, most of them don't think they did anything wrong. And what the unfortunate thing is that there are many people who share my story from them, and so may God have mercy upon them. And that's what you need to pray for, the people that hurt you. May God have mercy on them, or God judge them. So maybe I'll talk about this more. This is a very hard topic, but I hope I was of help to you today. God bless you. See you next time.